Mastering stakeholder engagement. Vulnerable voices are silenced until we prioritize their needs. How can we effectively prioritize and address the diverse needs of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholder groups, ensuring their voices are heard and their concerns are adequately addressed throughout our operational excellence initiatives? To effectively prioritize and address the diverse needs of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholder groups, a systematic and structured approach is necessary to ensure their voices are heard and their concerns are adequately addressed throughout operational excellence initiatives. This can be achieved by implementing the following steps. 1. Conduct stakeholder analysis. Identify and map vulnerable or marginalized stakeholder groups, including those with disabilities, indigenous communities, low-income households, and other groups that may be disproportionately impacted by operational activities. This analysis should consider the specific needs, concerns, and interests of each group. 2. Establish inclusive communication channels. Develop accessible and culturally sensitive communication channels to engage with vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders. This may include translated materials, accessible meeting spaces, and technology-enabled participation options, e.g., video conferencing, online surveys. Ensure that communication is clear, concise, and free from technical jargon. 3. Participatory engagement strategies. Implement participatory engagement strategies, such as focus groups, workshops, or town hall meetings, that foster open dialogue and active listening. These strategies should be designed to empower vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders to share their concerns, needs, and aspirations. 4. Inclusive feedback mechanisms. Establish inclusive feedback mechanisms, such as comment boxes, complaint mechanisms, or anonymous reporting systems, to enable stakeholders to provide input and report concerns or incidents. Ensure that these mechanisms are accessible, confidential, and responded to in a timely and meaningful manner. 5. Dedicated stakeholder liaisons. Appoint dedicated stakeholder liaisons or champions to serve as a single point of contact for vulnerable or marginalized stakeholder groups. These liaisons should be responsible for facilitating communication, building trust, and addressing concerns in a culturally sensitive and empathetic manner. 6. Culturally sensitive grievance mechanisms. Develop and communicate culturally sensitive grievance mechanisms that are accessible, transparent, and responsive to the needs of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders. Ensure that grievances are addressed in a fair, timely, and effective manner, and that stakeholders are informed of the outcomes and actions taken. 7. Capacity building and empowerment. Provide capacity building programs, training, or education initiatives to empower vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders, enabling them to effectively participate in operational excellence initiatives and advocate for their interests. 8. Collaborative problem solving. Foster collaborative problem-solving approaches that bring together vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders, operational teams, and subject matter experts to co-create solutions that address their specific needs and concerns. 9. Continuous monitoring and evaluation. Regularly monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of stakeholder engagement strategies, identifying areas for improvement and implementing corrective actions as needed. Use key performance indicators, KPIs, and metrics to measure the success of stakeholder engagement initiatives, such as participation rates, satisfaction levels, and grievance resolution rates. 10. Accountability and reporting. Ensure accountability by reporting on stakeholder engagement activities, progress, and challenges to senior management, the board of directors, or other governing bodies. This transparency helps to maintain a culture of accountability and encourages continuous improvement. 11. Inclusive policy development. Develop and implement policies, procedures, and standards that are inclusive and responsive to the needs of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders. Ensure that policies are accessible, communicated, and understood by all stakeholders. 12. Training and awareness. Provide training and awareness programs for operational staff, contractors, and suppliers on the needs, concerns, and interests of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholders. This should include cultural competency training, unconscious bias training, and awareness of power imbalances. By implementing these steps, organizations can ensure that the needs of vulnerable or marginalized stakeholder groups are effectively prioritized and addressed throughout operational excellence initiatives, promoting a more inclusive and equitable engagement approach.